Hey fellow tankers, Mobius Y here with the next episode in Mediums Forever, an ongoing series where I cover reviews of certain medium tanks down various lines as I grind them. Continuing down the Chinese tech tree, we're looking at the Tier 9 WZ-120 today. This was actually a pretty solid tank to play, but I do have a bit of a biased experience as I played my tank fully upgraded straight from the get-go. As I'm sure several of you know, I've had a lot of free XP handy for a very long time. So 15 seconds before this first game starts, you can see that I'm platooned with my clanmate Quevelin in a Conqueror and United Combat 645, an old buddy of mine, also in a WZ-120. And we are on Fisherman's Bay. We're not quite top tier, but you'll still be able to see me get some damage in, even against at least 1 or 2 tier 10s. It is still largely a tier 9 and tier 8 game. So this first game here, you will still see me doing medium tank stuff like you would expect from a medium tank of this kind of caliber. So with the WZ-120, it's a huge breath of fresh air over the T-34-2 in my opinion. For a lot of reasons. You get a respectable turret that actually has pretty good armor values on the front, even with these hatches on top that are pretty exposed that people like to shoot for and are fairly easy to pen. The rest of the turret is actually quite reliable and can cause a lot of bounces if you are using the map appropriately and playing nice and hull down. Also on the WZ-120, you have very respectable side armor. It's still flat, just like on the T-34-2, but you've got 80 millimeters of side armor on the WZ-120. So you don't suffer from the overmatching problems that the T-34-2 has. And honestly, that was pretty much my biggest gripe about the T-34-2, is that it has absolutely atrocious side armor coupled with overall poor hull armor. The WZ-120 still does suffer frontally from fairly poor hull armor. It's only about 100 millimeters thick. Even with the sloping, it's not very good effective armor values, so on and so forth. The WZ-120 overall is actually a fairly nimble tank. It does take a bit to accelerate, but its top speed is pretty good. Its traverse rates are pretty good as well. And when it is fully upgraded, and even before it's fully upgraded actually, it gets some pretty respectable armaments. The final 122mm cannon is something that gives people some serious pause. People who don't really know their tanks do not expect a tier 9 medium tank to slap them for over 400 damage. Let me just put that out there right now and say it. The gun handling isn't the greatest on this weapon, but it's just enough where if you've really gotten used to the pseudo-bad gun handling on the previous 2 tanks in particular, or from using the 122mm on the T-34-2 a tier previously, you should be kind of used to it. But there are improvements over this gun's handling over other guns. Now, one of the biggest concerns and weaknesses of the WZ-120 is the grind to get this thing fully upgraded is rather long, but it is well worth it in my personal opinion, as you get a fantastic tier 9 medium tank machine by the time you fully upgrade this thing. However, as I said, the grind is fairly long. The first several packages should not cost too much XP wise, as they are very subtle upgrades, starting with a gun upgrade, but you still only have 100mm guns up until you get to the very final package. It is the final 3 quote-unquote optional packages that technically you do not have to research before getting the 121, but I strongly recommend you do anyways. These packages are very expensive. The final 3 packages out of the 3, the first upgrade is an engine upgrade, and it's the same top engine that you get on the WZ-111 1-4, Tier 9 heavy tank. It's the top engine on that heavy tank. So if you've completed the heavy tanks in the Chinese tech tree, there's a good chance that you did not research this engine on the WZ-111 1-4, as it is the final optional package before you can actually get the 113. You don't have to get this package before getting the 113 tier 10 heavy tank. It's entirely optional, but as always, I definitely recommend you do, and if you have, then this first of 3 packages will save you some 48,000 XP when grinding the WZ-120. Otherwise, you'll have to grind that out on your WZ-120. The second to last package gives you a gun upgrade, and it normally costs 59,000 XP. It's the top gun used on the Chinese Tier 8 heavy tank, the 110. It's a very solid, very respectable gun. It will serve you quite well. It has better gun handling than a final 122mm gun, with Very, very decent penetration at 215. Much more respectable alpha damage at 320 as opposed to 250, which you should be used to using previously by now. And like I said, pretty decent gun handling overall. That package will cost another 59,000 XP. Now this very final gun, which is not used on any other tank, so this final gun will cost you XP. You will have to grind for this gun regardless, is another 59,000 XP. So those final 3 packages alone are almost the cost of another tank, considering the 121 is only about 180,000 or so to research. So 2 packages at 59,000, you're looking at about 118,000 XP, and then another 46 or 48,000 for the third to last package, getting an engine. You're looking at over 160,000 XP just to get this thing fully upgraded. Never mind the first 3 packages on this tank. So that is the biggest issue with the WZ-120. The grind can be very painful as it is just very, very long. But believe me, it is oh so worth it. The fully upgraded WZ-120 is a fantastic tank to play. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and in the right hands, it can be an absolute monster. Another big issue of the WZ-120 is the gun depression, of course. We'll get into that in a second here. So I got clipped out by a Waffle E100. Played a fairly good game, I like to think. Netting a little over 3,000 damage in this Fisherman's Bay game. Also getting 2,500 assisted and 1,200 blocked. 0 tanks that I destroyed, but I got a Confederate medal because I shot at least 8 different enemy tanks. And as I said, that's how I was able to net a fair amount of damage. So, as you can see, if you're really familiar with the maps, and, you know, if you're not only just a little bit lucky, but you also, you really know how to make this tank work for you, it's pretty easy to farm the damage when you have such a high alpha gun on a mobile platform like this. Now, as I said, another issue with the WZ-120 is that the gun depression is not great. You get 3 degrees of gun depression with the final package, so you should be getting used to this by now, of such low gun depression, only 3 or 5 degrees. The T-34-2 only has 3 degrees when it's fully upgraded, so you should have some feel for it already, but the WZ-120 should really teach you the very spots you can use and use well in various parts of all sorts of maps, as 3 degrees of gun depression is what you're going to have to get used to when you also get the 121 at tier 10. So with that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at the packages on the WZ-120. Opening them up here, so starting off completely stock, you get the base WZ-120 turret. You get the 100mm 59-100T gun, which, if I recall correctly, is one of the 2 top guns that you get on the T-34-2. I believe it's the alternative to the 122mm that I didn't necessarily recommend for people, so to speak. So it's not really that great of a gun that you want to be utilizing this early on in the game, but thankfully this first package here is not too expensive. You get an engine upgrade and your first gun upgrade with the 100mm 60-100T. It's not that great on the alpha damage, but the gun handling is better than the previous gun, and you get slightly more penetration. It's only 189 though, so you will probably be shooting still quite a bit of premium ammo. Get used to using this gun though. Figure out what works for you, the proper amount of mounting premium ammunition along with standard AP, because this gun is also on the next package. This second package here gives you the much needed turret upgrade that really makes the WZ-120 shine in hull down and or side scraping situations. You also get the tracks upgrade to increase your traverse speed. So here we go with the WZ-120 Model 3 package. This is the first quote-unquote optional package that you do not have to get before researching the 121, but I strongly recommend to anybody grinding this tank that you do it anyways, simply because, well, how do I put this nicely? These upgraded packages really make the WZ-120 what it is, to be totally honest. So getting this package, I definitely recommend. It will also be free, 100% free, if you fully elited the WZ-111 1-4 Tier 9 heavy tank, because this is the exact same engine. The 121 50 LT is the exact same engine that you get on the fully elited WZ-111 1-4. Chances are that's not the case, though, that you have this elited, so this is a good 46,000-48,000 XP to grind out. Now this next package here, this is where you get a very respectable armament with the 100mm 62-100T. This is the top gun on the Tier 8 110 heavy tank. A very, very solid, well-performing gun. It will serve you quite well. And if you've fully elited the 110 by going down the heavy line before this, this package will be 100% free of XP. It will still cost you silver to mount it, but it will cost no XP to research it, giving you a pretty mobile platform with a fairly hard-hitting gun that will be very reliable in terms of getting your damage. Now this very final package here, you get the 122mm 60-122T. This is the top gun on this tank. It is completely unique to this tank, so you cannot get it anywhere else. This will be 59,000 points of experience to grind out. I highly recommend it. At least give this gun a shot, because it really makes the WZ-120 come into its own element. Let's open up this package and take a look at the hard stats. So at first glance, this final gun, it does look like the gun handling is really not that good. You're looking at a 3.4 aim time with this top gun, as well as the .37 accuracy. The accuracy is fairly respectable, but that aim time at 3.4 can be extremely aggravating to those who cannot stand poor gun handling weapons. However, the 122mm does pay off in respects to its penetration and damage values. You're looking at 249 average penetration with a standard AP round at 440 alpha damage. Your heat rounds are also very good at 340 penetration, another 440 alpha damage. These heat rounds are for those clutch moments you just really need to make your shots count, or just to shoot through E100 or mouse turrets right in the face if you so choose. The HE rounds, 68mm of penetration, pretty respectable HE penetration for a very high alpha damage of 530. Very useful to shoot these at very softly armored targets, such as bore SIGs, waffle 4s, waffle E100s, so to speak. Now the rate of fire on the gun is also another downfall at only 5 rounds per minute. Even mounting a gun rammer, vents, and training brothers in arms on the crew, you're still looking at about a 10-second reload on this gun. So you need to make sure every shot counts, and that's why it's important to mount a respectable amount of heat rounds along with your standard AP rounds. Now this final engine gives you a horsepower of 600. Not the greatest power to ton ratio, but the WZ-120 will pick up its speed once you start to get it going. Once the acceleration kicks in, it will actually start to get going to a decent speed of 40 to 50 kilometers an hour. The traverse speeds are also very good. The tank traverses at 46 degrees per second in the hull, 42 degrees per second in the turret, and the turret armor values are also quite good. You've got 220mm on the front, very well sloped at all angles, 160mm in the side, and only 65 in the rear. So very, very respectable turret armor. And you're also sporting a view range of 390. Pretty good view range, really handy for spotting out the enemy reds if you want to play this thing in a spotting role, as it does have a very good camo rating due to being such a low-profile tank. This final gun is what I recommend you go for. As I said, it's very expensive to get, but if you decide to stick with this 110, the 110's final gun, the 100mm 62-100T, it's not a terrible choice. You could definitely stick with this gun for the 180,000 XP that you need to research the 121, but at the very least you should get to this gun if you're not going to fully upgrade the WZ-120. With this second to last gun, you have a rate of fire of 7.32, so a much better rate of fire, but the penetration and damage values are quite a bit lower. You've only got 215 penetration with standard AP. That's still better than something like a T-54 or Object 430 version 2, and 320 alpha damage is pretty respectable for a Tier 9 medium tank. With the APCR rounds, you've only got 265 penetration, not a huge deal. That's not going to go through things like E100 turrets, like the heat rounds on the final gun, and still 320 alpha damage. Your HE rounds also suffer penetration values. You've only got 50mm of penetration and 420 alpha damage, so not a huge increase in alpha damage, but it's still definitely worth carrying a few HE rounds if you decide to use this gun. The aim time and accuracy are improved. Well, the aim time at least is an improvement over the 122mm gun. You've got 2.9 aim time, which is much better than the 3.4 on the final gun. The accuracy is the same at 0.37. So if you choose to go for this gun instead, the 100mm 62-100T, which is the final gun on the 110 Tier 8 heavy tank, it's entirely a viable option, and it is totally up to you. So let's take a look at the equipment and supplies that I used to make the WZ-120 work for me. For my supplies, I mounted a hefty amount of standard AP rounds at 25, but still quite a bit of heat rounds at 12 pieces of ammunition. These heat rounds were shot fairly regularly at really hard targets like T-110E5s, Mouse, E-100, T-110E3s, the list goes on, VK-45 Bravos, E-75, so on and so forth. They're really necessary for when you need to farm that extra damage, earn your extra XP and silver. Now for high explosive, this tank does carry a fair bit of ammo for its reload speed, so a good 2 or 3 pieces of high explosive I highly recommend. You could even carry maybe 5 if you're carrying less AP or heat rounds than I did. For consumables, very standard for a tier 9 tank for me. Large repair kit, large first aid kit, and an automatic fire extinguisher. Each of these giving passive bonuses, such as improved repair speed on my modules and protecting the crew from damage, but also the automatic fire extinguisher, reducing the chance of fire overall. Very handy to have that equipped, in my personal opinion, as Chinese tanks do have a tendency to catch fire. You may consider carrying 2 repair kits as well, as this tank has a tendency to get ammo racked, as is another flaw of a lot of Chinese tanks. Let's take a look at the equipment that I used. Now the equipment was again all about the reload. Mounted a medium caliber tank gun rammer and improved ventilation to try and reduce that reload as much as possible. And lastly, the much needed vertical stabilizer. Highly recommend this piece of equipment to reduce the overall handling of the gun when you're moving or rotating the turret, no matter which gun you use. Even if you're using the better handling guns, definitely recommend a vertical stabilizer. If you were to change out any piece of equipment, it would probably be the improved ventilation. You could swap it out for something like coated optics if you're going more for assisted damage, trying to be more of a spotter. Or if the reload isn't as much of an issue to you as the gun handling, you could swap out the improved ventilation for an enhanced gun laying drive. Beyond that, I don't really recommend much of anything else, maybe a wet ammo rack, but it's, as I say, it is entirely up to you how you go about doing that. Now, one thing I do want to go over before jumping into the armor profiles is the crew skills that I had by the time I fully upgraded the WZ-120. Let's take a look at my skills and perks. So, starting off, I trained repairs on the Type 59 premium tank that I have. So I had that before I even started this line, and it was available when I grinded up the Type T34. Sixth Sense, I fully trained this and overtrained the crew when I was using the Type T34, so I had this completed by the time I got to the Tier 6. Mentor is the third skill I chose. This one's optional. I trained this one out to completion and overtrained the crew with the Type 58. The Type 58 was a very good tank. I did enjoy playing it for those extra games to train out this crew skill. And Brothers in Arms, I fully trained on the T-34-1 at Tier 7 to help in every aspect of the tank's performance, but especially the reload speeds of the slow-firing guns. With the T-34-2, I got clutch braking, which is another essential skill, in my opinion, of medium tanks. And at Tier 9 with the WZ-120, I did something a little bit different and trained track mechanic on this tank. I side-scraped a lot with this tank, and I felt that my tracks getting repaired as quickly as possible was extremely essential to the success of this tank, in my personal opinion. Other skills you'll want, camouflage, definitely. Chinese mediums, they have pretty good camo ratings. You'll want camouflage at some point. You could also do something like pain tolerance to protect your driver a little bit better as well. But definitely you can also do off-road driving to improve the terrain resistances. It will help with the overall acceleration of the tank just a little bit. Silent driving isn't a bad choice for medium tanks to help improve the camo rating while on the move. And definitely something like muffled shot could be something you consider. Armorer to reduce the effect of a damaged gun on the overall accuracy and whatnot. The gun can get damaged quite a lot. You'll want to consider safe stowage eventually on this crew because Chinese tanks have a habit of getting ammo racked. And you may even want to put intuition on this tank because, as I said, the reload speed is quite long. Beyond that, it's entirely up to you what you do. Those are simply my recommendations. But that, as I said, totally up to you. You can follow my suggestions or choose not to. So, with that out of the way, let's take a look at tanks.gg and take a peek at the WZ-120's overall armor profile. Okay, here we are on tanks.gg looking at the Tier 9 Chinese tank, the WZ-120. So as I said, the turret face has 220 millimeters of armor and about 190 on the more extreme sides, all the way down to 160 on the sides of the turret itself and the hatches. Now the front of the hull, is, as I said before, is quite weak. You've only got 100 millimeters thickness of plating. And even with the sloping, it's not very effective in terms of the armor value. You can bully tier 7s with this kind of frontal armor, but that's about it. The lower plate is thankfully the same thickness as the upper front plate though, so you can get some troll bounces if somebody's trying to aim downwards at your lower plate, trying to get shots there. As I said, the turret front, they're very thick, very resilient. You're getting lots of good values here. It's weakest down near the bottom where it's flattest next to the gun mantlet, but anywhere else it is quite strong except for the very top above the gun between the hatches. You've got a 30mm plate there, and it can be shot from the front of the WZ-120 if somebody gets a really lucky hit there, or the hatches. In the center of the hatches, it's very flat and only about 180mm, so somebody shooting a high penetration enough gun will have no problems penetrating that. The biggest saving grace of the WZ-120, in my opinion, is this 80mm of side armor. It's still very flat, just like the T-34-2, but it's 80mm, not a little pansy 45 that gets overmatched by 90mm guns. Nothing will overmatch this except for a Jagdpanzer E-100. Not even with a double overmatch. So this tank is very, very capable at side scraping. You want to be poking out pretty much at this angle where the majority of the side of the tank is at a pseudo auto bounce angle where low penetration guns have no chance of hitting that. And if you side scrape even more at an even sharper angle, you put it at an auto bounce angle, forcing just about every gun that's shooting at you to try and hit you in the upper parts of your turret right in your hatches there. So let's take a look at the overall stats and the gun constraints. As I said, you get 3 degrees of gun depression on this top gun here. It takes some serious getting used to, working out certain ridges and ditches, getting your gun depression down so that you can shoot tanks that are below you. It is what it is. The elevation is 15 degrees, well enough to shoot tanks that are trying to come down on top of you from above. Your overall DPM with this final gun is just under 2300, so that definitely does improve with the vents as well as the gun rammer. Your total HP is 1650 when you're fully upgraded, so you can take a few hits, but you definitely want to avoid getting blasted by those tier 10 TDs, which will shave off a good half of your hit points there. Now let's compare the soft stats of the WZ-120 with the soft stats of the T-34-2 from the previous tank, so that you get an idea of the comparison in the gun handling, so to speak. So it should be comparing the WZ-120 with the T-34-2's top 100mm gun, as it is. You can't quite see it at the top there, but it is comparing the top 100mm gun that I used on the T-34-2. So you've got better DPM with the WZ-120, better alpha damage per shot, way better penetration. That goes without saying. It's a higher tier tank. The overall dispersion is about the same, but on the WZ-120 you actually have better dispersion values when moving or traversing the tank, but your turret traverse value is a bit worse than the T-34-2's top 100mm gun. It is what it is. You've also got pretty much identical terrain resistances as the T-34-2, so expect very similar acceleration kind of mechanics when you are moving around with your WZ-120, but you do have a better overall top speed than the previous tank. So you'll find that your WZ-120, while it still accelerates kind of sluggishly like the T-34-2, you do get a better top speed, so you will hit speeds better. You can do more medium tank things with this kind of a tank. So that's a look at the WZ-120 armor profile as well as the soft stats. Let's go ahead and take a peek at the module locations from wattinfo.net. So looking at the photos from wattinfo.net, the very front of the WZ-120, you can see that again the driver is exposed from the front on the left hand side of the tank, and there's also fuel tanks directly opposite him. The hatches are weak points. It's barely indicated there, but they are weak points on the top of the tank. So if you're playing this tank hull down and playing it properly, it'll be very difficult to hit those, but it is possible to do it. However, that is the best way you can protect your tank with this vehicle. The left side of the WZ-120, again, there's fuel tanks in the front, behind the tracks. There's ammo rack directly behind that, underneath the front end of the turret, and there's engine deck in the very back of the hull. You're also looking at the gunner on the left side of the turret, right in the middle. The commander is who gets knocked out when the left hatch at the top of the turret gets shot as well, so he can die a lot. The very back of the tank, you've got ammo rack in the lower right rear portions of the turret. It's nothing but engine deck in the back of the hull as well, so if somebody manages to get the flank on you and get shots into the back areas of your hull, you're looking at possible engine fire there or just a plain old damaged engine. really crippling your mobility. The right side of the WZ-120, more engine deck in the very back of the hull. You've got ammo rack in the back side of the turret. The loader is directly above the ammo rack, so if you're shooting anywhere, if you're shooting a WZ-120 anywhere in the back of the turret, aim for the right-hand side, because you'll probably knock out the loader or damage the ammo rack, and that'll just cripple the reload on this tank, just making it absolutely atrociously long. You've got more ammo rack on the right side of the hull, beneath the front end of the turret, and the very front of the hull, again, has more fuel tanks. So that's basically a detailed look at the WZ-120. As I said, it's a very quirky kind of tank due to the somewhat poor gun handling and the very low value of gun depression, but you can really make this tank work for you, because this top gun, with the penetration and the overall alpha damage per shot, it's very difficult to do poorly in this tank. If I myself ever did bad in this tank, it was 100% my fault, because this tank performs too well for it to be the tank's fault if I ever get killed early in a game. So 5 seconds before the next game starts, you can see it's another game where I'm still platooned with my buddies Quevelin and United Combat. This time we are on Engsk, and we're on very top tier. So I'm going to go ahead and abuse that. You're going to see me here utilizing my 80mm of side armor as best as I can, trying to protect my HP pool while I hold down the one line from the advancing Red Army. Engsk is one of my favorite maps for tanks like the WZ-120, where you have very respectable side armor, lending to good side-scraping capabilities. Got a little bit annoyed with the T-10 there. He decided to just kind of shove me out of the way as he barreled down the one line here. So it is what it is, but, you know, people going to do what people going to do. So an E-50 tries to get a shot off on me. When he pulls in, the KV-3 comes out, so I try to land a shot on the KV-3, but my shot dips low, only into his tracks, causing 0 damage. So as you can see, I'm just rocking back and forth, not exposing the front part of my hull too much, as that is the weakest part of this tank. Unfortunately, I wasn't side-scraping at a very good angle, allowing the E-50 to plant a nice shot into my side armor. WZ-120 also tries to plant a shot into my side, but it's absorbed into my tracks, and I retaliate once more with a nice shot right through the WZ-120's front. So this is kind of the place to be in a WZ-120 sometimes, baiting shots into the side armor or into the tracks from enemy tanks, or just making them miss completely as they try to shoot your turret hatches, but being able to respond in kind with a nice 440 alpha bomb right in their own various weak points. And with 249 average penetration, this final gun will more than likely punch right through the vulnerable parts of the enemy tanks, very easily netting you some good damage. A very lucky shot there on the KV-3. He was hardly exposing much of the front of his hull, but I was able to thread the needle there. RNG was in my favor with that shot, landing a nice blow, netting a little bit more damage. So the rest of my platoon is up in everybody's face. We're really pushing hard in the town side. It looks kind of like things could be going bad on the eastern side, as the enemy is able to flank around and get side shots on the friendlies that are still down this street to my left on the F line. So I simply blow right past those enemies. I want to get in behind these guys that are still in the middle holding up our advance, especially the ones that are holding up my platoon mates or getting shots at my platoon mates. So I ignore the medium tank in the back there. I'm going to get a shot on this enemy WZ-120, doing a nice drive-by shot on him. RNG once again in my favor, planting a nice 400 plus damage bomb, netting myself some more damage. So I'm always, as you can see, I'm always glancing at the map when it's appropriate as well. When the action isn't really heated up for me, I'm always glancing at the map, and I pinged an enemy medium moving back to our base. So I know I've got to clean these guys up quickly, as fast as I can. I've still got a lot of HP, so I can still play somewhat aggressive with this tank, especially on an M103 that does not have the final gun. So trying to side scrape around the corner, he kind of flubs his shot, shoots me in the tracks. With the combination of repairs, track mechanic, and a large repair kit, I'm able to repair them very quickly, able to come out and perform a little flanking maneuver, getting a shot in the side of his turret before he can even reload. M103 bounces his shot. Doesn't look like he's fully upgraded. I believe he is completely stock with the sound that his gun made, so me and the T-10 took full advantage of it, putting 2 more shots into him and taking him out of the game. Now, I kind of had a brain fart here, trying to figure out which way I should go to get back to our base. There's 3 medium tanks threatening our base right now. A Type 59, a Freedom, and a Motherland. 3 tanks that could prove a serious problem if they're left unchecked for too long. Unfortunately, my platoon mate Quevelin also got taken out, so he's unable to assist. So it's pretty much up to me and United Combat as it doesn't look like the rest of the team, aside from the heavy tank on my right, is really too concerned about our base cap being threatened. So I have to pull all the way back, try and get some shots on these guys so that we can get some better positioning on these guys. Now, I got lucky with the Super Pershing there. He was on the move. I was on the move. I spotted him with his side completely onto me, and I just put a very lucky round right through his side armor. Similar thing with the Type 59. He puts an APCR through my front, damaging me, but I respond in kind, taking him out of the game. This leaves just the Motherland. I know I can penetrate him most anywhere, so I simply ram him to get the reset, and then put one shell right through his front for some more damage, allowing a teammate to finish him off, and we are able to secure the win this game. Pretty good result that game. 37-15 total damage dealt, another 1280 blocked. So by simply utilizing the armor as best as possible and managing your health pool, but also keeping a good eye on the map, you can really make the WZ-120 work for you. The biggest thing that you want to watch for with the WZ-120 is, one, the poor gun depression, but you should be getting used to that by now from playing the T-34. Two, these Chinese mediums really teach you little aspects of maps where there's just these odd little ditches or rubble piles where you can just use them to great effect by abusing your good turret armor on a tank like the WZ-120. And the other thing too is the WZ-120's grind. To get it fully elited, it will cost a lot of XP, so expect to be on this tank for quite a long time. But as I said, and as you can see from those two games that I played, it is well worth it. It is a very well performing machine, a great tier 9 medium tank to have in anybody's garage if you can put up with the grind. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Mediums Forever. I hope to see you in the next episode when we finish off the Chinese medium tank line with the tier 10 121. This has been Mobius Y. Have a wonderful night, and as always, happy tanking.